What is up, everybody, and welcome to my full season review of Chucky Season 2. If you have not been following my channel, I have reviewed every single individual episode of this 8-episode season, as well as the first season last year. I have a whole playlist. I'll put a link up here for that if you want to see more in-depth thoughts going along like in real time with the season. But I've had about half of a week to sit and kind of formulate my thoughts. Not that I needed a lot of time. My thoughts have been pretty consistent throughout this entire season, but as somebody who has been a lifelong fan of this franchise, a lifelong fan of Chucky, I wouldn't go as far as say I was a naysayer, but I didn't have the most faith in the world on what Chucky was going to be able to do in a TV format, and I was actually won over by the first season. I was surprised genuinely at how much I really enjoyed what they did with that season. Few things didn't come together for me, especially by the end of it, but overall I really liked Season 1, was really looking forward to Season 2. And unfortunately, Season 2 for me is my least favorite thing that this franchise has done since Seed of Chucky. There were a lot of creative decisions made. There were concepts that were explored in this season that, just for my own personal preference, are things that I do not appreciate this series doing. I did not enjoy seeing them explore that, and it kind of taints the overall franchise for me that we have gone that direction with certain characters and certain aspects and rules of how this franchise works, which I'll get a little bit more into detail with later. But this is a season that seems to be very divisive. I've seen a lot of people online, especially on Twitter, that are loving this, that are appreciating how wacky and crazy it's been, that love the fact that the franchise continues to find new things to do and continues to, quote unquote, evolve. And, I don't know. I don't know if those people have been lifelong fans of this franchise and they love having different views or they love having different aspects of Chucky, or if there's somebody that maybe was casual and they just like it being weirder and crazier. I really don't know, but there is a very loud percentage of people that have adored Season 2 of Chucky, and there is a very loud percentage of people that have despised or really disliked the direction that this franchise has gone. And while I wouldn't go as far as to say that I despised it, I definitely belong much more into that camp, unfortunately, which kills me to say, because I want to come on here and say nothing but positive things about the directions of the franchises that I love and adore. But as I said in one of my episode reviews, I think that one of the most important things about being a fan of something and exploring, communicating things that you love is that you have to be honest and explore the parts of it that you don't like. Otherwise, I don't really feel like you're being genuine. You can't like everything. You can't love everything. And no matter how much you'll want to like everything, sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes it's just not your season. But before we get into all of the positives and negatives of Season 2 of Chucky, let's take a moment to talk about the sponsor of today's video, eWin Racing. For about 3 years now, I've been using eWin Racing's gaming chairs for my own personal studio as well as downstairs at my wife's office desk. And where on Black Friday, I told you all about this brand new model here of gaming chair called the Flash XL, today I want to talk to you on Cyber Monday about the ergonomic fabric covered chair if you're looking for something that has a little bit more of an office aesthetic versus a stylish gaming chair. Just like with the other chairs, the fabric is covering a cold cure foam, which is the most comfortable thing that you're going to sit on in an office or a gaming setting. There's of course also the two removable and adjustable pillows, one for lumbar support and one for neck support, which is held on by this little strap. All of the armrests are fully adjustable 4D armrests where they can adjust both the width, the height, and the length of where you want your elbows to go, so any person can sit here and find a spot where it's going to be comfortable for their arms. And where this model differs is in the wheels, which actually have hubless casters. So as opposed to the solid wheels, these ones actually have more of a futuristic look. And just like on Black Friday, here as well on Cyber Monday, my personal discount code is actually going to save you more money than any of the deals available on the eWin website. Use my promo code CODY30 to save an entire 30% off of your order. And check out all of the other available models available on ewinracing.com. And thank you to eWin for sponsoring today's video. So essentially where Season 1 left off is that you have these 3 kids, one of them was killed off, the 3 surviving kids that have been seriously affected by Chucky, where he has either killed their parents or stuck them in a really bad situation and killed people that are close to them. And Chucky is now within about 72 different doll bodies. Jennifer Tilly, or Tiffany, is now kind of transporting these dolls in this van, trying to get them to this other city to unleash this diabolical plan where multiple Chuckies are going to be unleashed upon the country or the world, but just at the last minute, Andy takes over the van, commandeers it, and drives away, where the Tiffany doll, housing another fracture of the Tiffany soul, is holding him at gunpoint. And so that's where we're left off, and where this season picks back up is immediately there, to where Andy is able to dispatch of Tiffany and drives that van with all of the Chucky dolls that were just now inhabited with the season-long plot of season 1 over a cliff. And after the kids kind of reconvene after a summer or whatever, or a year, they end up in this situation where Chucky has now come back into their lives for revenge and caused a death that has put them into this isolated little Catholic school style boarding school, prison, whatever you want to call it. And now that is the setting, that is the direction of season 2, is Chucky trying to take revenge on these kids while they are isolated in this religious environment. So starting off with the positives of season 2, the main thing that I continuously enjoyed throughout this season, whether or not I liked what was going on in a narrative stance with the character or not, is the variety that we got from Brad Dourif's voice acting, where there was multiple forms of Chucky with very different personalities and different kind of themes attached to them. And so we got to hear different flavors of Chucky from Brad Dourif. You get regular Chucky, which of course is always great. We got to have a good Chucky aspect to him, to where, dare I say, there was actually a cute version of the character. We had a buff Chucky with a little bit more of a modulated voice. There was even a Chucky that was kind of taking after Apocalypse Now at one point. And so being that we've had Brad Dourif voicing this character for a few decades now, it was cool to be able to hear him kind of stretch his voice, if you will, and show different shades of this character throughout the season. Of the core characters, the kids that we are following throughout the season, I actually liked Lexi more than all of them. I think that on a story front, she was given the most to do, the most to chew on, the most to work with, and just performance-wise, I believe the actress is Olivia Lind. I think she did better than everybody this season as far as the younger actors, and which is funny, because if you watched my reviews of season 1, I despised that character to the point where I was actually hoping she was going to be killed off in a violent way, no matter how young the character was, no matter how deprived that is to a certain degree. I was like, okay, she is the worst human being of all time. She needs to die violently. And the way that they have kind of brought me back around on her character is 100% a testament to the writing of that character as well as the performance of the actress. So amongst the main characters, she was really the only one that I was continuously engaged with. Once again, this season, I still think that the powerhouse as far as the actors on board is Fiona Dourif as Nika. Now, she is confined in this season, obviously, with where they left her at the end of season 1, so she doesn't have as much physically to do, which is disappointing. That's one of the reasons I was a little unsure about the direction they took her character by season 1, but on an acting front, I think that Fiona Dourif is just killing it. I think that the way that she has these two different sides to her, where she has Nika, she has this scared person who's still a strong character, and then whenever she is inhabited by Charles Lee Ray and has to kind of switch over to him, she does phenomenal at imitating her father and bringing this other shade to Chucky that I really like. So the little bit of Nika that we get in this season, I thought yet again was a standout. Keeping in mind the budgetary limitations of a TV show, I think that a lot of the kills this season were actually pretty damn good. Now, there was shots that looked better than others. You know, there was time where they relied on CGI and some of the more digital sides of the kills that you could feel the budgetary restraints on those specific shots, but a lot more of the physical stuff, the blood, the fake heads, the, you know, nasty pieces of flesh and skull that are being split apart in a scene. Like, whenever it's actual physical, practical effects, I actually thought they were pretty damn effective and amongst the goriest stuff that you're going to find on TV. So as the Carnage whore, yeah, I like it. Color me shocked as hell, but I am going to put Glenn and Glenda in the positive aspect of this season, which I don't know, is it more of a statement at how good they did with Glenn and Glenda, or how much of a statement on all the things that they did that I disliked, that I look back at Glenn and Glenda and say that that was actually a redeeming quality of this season. But as somebody that pretty much despises Seed of Chucky, as many times as I've given it a new shot, as many times as I've tried to watch it with fresh eyes, tried to give it time to maybe adapt, maybe it was ahead of its time, maybe I wasn't ready for it. I've watched it so many times that it's inevitable. I don't like this movie. There's nothing about it that's ever going to change about that. Glenn and Glenda, whenever they announced that character, even when they just mentioned the character in passing in season 1, I was like, oh no, oh fuck! But the way that they actually flesh the character out, no pun intended, with having a human version of them and having two different sides to the character, and the way that the characters were used within the story of season 2 in regards to Tiffany and the kind of shifting of allegiances and the way that Glenda goes off with Kyle and Nika, and even some of the relationship challenges that they have with Chucky as their father, I actually thought was some of the better exploration of characters in this season. And despite the fact that it kind of feels pointless by the end whenever they end up going back into the Glenn doll and send Glenn off to, the whatever fate that character has now. I don't know if we're going to get him in another season. I don't know if they're trying to do a spin-off or if that's just it. That was just a way of wrapping a bow around that character and saying, hey, I brought him back and now we're done. I like the way that they evolved that character and the way that they utilized that character that wasn't just so silly and slapstick and ridiculous the way that they did in Seed. And the final positive, which is a very small thing, and if I'm putting this in the positives, you know that I'm running out of things to talk about. The opening sequences, the graphical thing that they do with the Chucky logo every single episode is always a different object that are kind of making up the Chucky logo, and it's always a really enjoyable thing to every single week get to see a new opening credit sequence with the score that I love from Child's Play 2, but also just seeing these little Easter egg objects that you get to zoom in on it and then it zooms out and forms the whole logo. So I've always liked that creative aspect that they brought to the opening sequence of this show. The only major mixed aspect that I have with this season is the more meta elements that they brought in. Now, on the positive side, there's times where they reference themselves that I actually thought was mildly clever, or I was, allowed myself to have a lot of fun with. There's essentially a whole standalone episode that's like a Clue-style murder mystery with Jennifer Tilly and Joe Pantoliano and Gina Gershon, and while if I was loving everything else that was going on, that might have been a negative for me on any other season, to me it was actually one of the few seasons that was just so separated from all the weirdness going on that I just allowed myself to enjoy it, and kind of Joe Pantoliano and Gina Gershon especially kind of playing into the running jokes and the sexuality of Jennifer Tilly and references to Bound, and I liked that. And there was also some moments to where Chucky would kind of reference other movies that I will admit felt like a bit of a crutch of the show at some point, to where it felt like, do we really need to do this in every single episode? But there was a lot of moments that I did appreciate, like the Hannibal Lecter and the Exorcist, although they should have used Exorcist 3, what the fuck? And then there was moments like Apocalypse Now that, again, still silly enjoyable, but it was a little bit too much. But there is an aspect of this show that is constantly referencing these other works that I assume are big influences or big favorites of Don Mancini that are fun little Easter eggs to point out. I just wish they were a little bit more subtle, more of something you can actually kind of dig through and try to find versus something that's just shoved in front of your face. But the meta aspects that I don't just dislike, I hated throughout the season, and I hate when this franchise does this, is when it just goes way too far with making Chucky like almost this Crypt Keeper character, to where he is referencing the show itself and he's talking, breaking the fourth wall to the audience, and there's a segment where he kills a WWE wrestler and is kind of like a opening talk show and a closing talk show to the episode, the Jennifer Tilly one, and then at the end of the season when he's sitting by the fire with the fucking pipe and going back over all the carnage of the season, it kind of kills any form of reality for me that this show is trying to establish. It just treats everything like a joke. And I'm on record numerous times over the past 8 weeks, I don't like when this franchise treats itself as a joke. And there was a moment in the first episode that I've heard all the defenses in the world for it. I think even Don Mancini came out and was kind of trying to give some extra context to what he was trying to do with it, to where the kids in the show actually reference the movie of Bride of Chucky. And look, you can tell me that it's about Chucky Goes Psycho, that movie within the movie that's in Seed of Chucky, but the way that the dialogue itself is written makes it sound like they're referring to Bride of Chucky. So if that tweet by Don Mancini or the interview or whatever it was that everybody was sharing around as like a gotcha actually thing, if that didn't exist, most of us watching the show would have taken it at face value, which we all did in episode 1, which is, why the fuck are these kids referring to the movies within this universe? Do all these movies exist in this universe? It's confusing and it's weird and it's stupid and we shouldn't be doing that. That's the reason why everybody lost their mind and went, what are you doing? What are you talking about? If you have to do an interview or share a tweet to calm down a large portion of your audience about one line of dialogue, then that line of dialogue should have been written differently or not written at all. And now moving on to the negatives, one that I'm going to get out of the way quickly because everything else is kind of all one issue, all wrapped together. I just don't like the way that they've utilized Andy and Kyle in this show thus far. There's individual moments with these characters that I really like. There's scenes that I really like in season 1, like the whole Pulp Fiction thing I thought was badass, and there's aspects to what they do in this season that I thought was interesting, but there's not enough of them here. And maybe that's just me as an old school fan, as somebody that's been there since the beginning. I love those characters. I've grown up with those characters. I'm attached to those characters. I will always value those characters more than any of these new ones that you're introducing to me, especially when you're not replacing them with more interesting characters. And so when you get to season 2 and yet again, Andy and Kyle are like this much of the season, to me, that's frustrating. It's like blue balls at this point for the old school fans. I just wish they had more significant stuff to do within these 2 seasons. They feel more like extended cameos than they feel like these huge, genuine pieces of the story. And by the way that the Andy and Kyle characters are kind of left off on a dialogue front, it almost makes it seem like they're now exiting the franchise. I don't know if that's true or not, but the way that they kind of leave off talking to each other, looking forward to the future, it makes it seem like that was their swan song, that was their goodbye, and I don't like that. Beyond that, basically every other issue that I have with this season all boils down to the writing. I felt like the writing was extremely subpar in Chucky season 2. I was impressed and surprised at the writing and the things that they were able to do in season 1 and bringing Chucky to this TV weekly format and the things that they were exploring, even on paper ideas that I would have winced at, I thought were actually executed fairly well in season 1. Season 2, the writing continuously let me down throughout these 8 weeks. First of all, just on a structure format, I felt like the season was put together very strange to where the opening of the season felt like its own isolated episode, its own isolated story, and then just kind of tailed off and introduced us to the rest of the season. And then the season finale was very much the same way, where it was its own isolated story, its own isolated events that was just kind of like an epilogue to what was going on. So it was really just the middle 6 episodes that actually felt like a flowing season narrative. And so that in and of itself was weird to me. On a character front, I did not like or enjoy what they did with Jake and Devin. I feel like their relationship kind of turned into one of the more annoying aspects of the season, where season 1, that was a very prevalent factor where, you know, obviously because of Don Mancini, who he is, was trying to put certain aspects into these characters. I think Jake specifically, he even said, was like kind of a version of himself at that age, which is great. It was fine. It was done well in season 1 for the most part. Season 2, they relied on more of the cliches of relationship turmoils, to where it almost felt like there was these manufactured issues between these 2 characters, to where Jake, for whatever fucking reason, is siding with Chucky over Devin, and Devin the whole season just wants like Jake to acknowledge him and listen to him, and it was just like that annoying relationship shit to where it's like, you guys just need to talk. There's like one fucking line of dialogue that needs to happen to you that would resolve all of this shit, and it's taken 7 weeks to get there. Outside of Glenn and Glenda and building out that character dynamic, almost everything that they did with the character of Tiffany, I didn't care for much in this season. It seems like Jennifer Tilly and Tiffany is the section of this show where they really crank up like the campiness to like an 11. And to me, it almost feels one note. Every single time we go back to Tiffany, she is turned up so much that there's like no variety to what we're experiencing with this character. I didn't love what they did with her in season 1 because there was an aspect of what I'm talking about. But season 2, it is full force, where every time you go back to her, she is just so turned up. She's so campy. She's so over the top. She's so like just flying off the screen, chewing up the scenery. She's watching Liar, Liar over and over, self-referential humor towards Jennifer Tilly. I mean, the isolated episode with her and the murder mystery is like the only time that I enjoyed it because it just felt like its own thing. But every time we kind of cut back to her and got away from the Chucky stuff, it just felt like a totally different tone was going on. And I miss the Tiffany that we got in Bride of Chucky and even Seed of Chucky to a degree. I don't feel like she was that character yet, to where she was a fairly serious and nefarious and kind of creepy character, to where she actually was smart, and she actually was devious, and there was an aspect to her that was almost more frightening than Chucky, or more impressive than Chucky, to where she got the best kills in Bride of Chucky, and we didn't even care because she was such a badass character. And now she's kind of turned into like a cartoon and like a joke of herself, and I just don't enjoy that aspect of Tiffany. All the different things they were trying to explore with her being scared and nervous and unsure, and by the end of the season she's like petrified trying to get back into the doll's body. The whole journey to get there to me didn't feel like the Tiffany that I feel like the character is. It's like they've tried to mold her into this ultra ditzy psycho serial killer, to where her psychosis just makes her unpredictable and weird and almost stupid to a degree with some of the things that she does. And that's not an entertaining version of the character. I like one that is just, if not more, devious and smart and sadistic than Chucky. And I feel like we haven't really got that aspect of the character since the first couple of movies that she was in. Going back to this series not taking itself seriously anymore, there was this constant theme of just there being no rules whatsoever anymore throughout season 2. This is something that I had an issue with in Cult of Chucky, to where it felt like they were just kind of tearing up the rule book that we've been following since the 80s and just rewriting their own rules, and we can do whatever the hell we want now at the drop of a hat. That I don't like, because I think it diminishes the stakes. It diminishes the investment that I have, because there's got to be some parameters of what we can and can't do. Otherwise, you can do whatever the fuck you want, and I'm supposed to not be surprised by it. And it was never more prevalent than in season 2, to where almost every single episode there was something new that they were doing, or something new that they were exploring that has never been a part of the Child's Play rule book. And in some cases, they would introduce this rule and then break it the same exact episode, to where you get Buff Chucky and you get all these other things where it's like, how the fuck, just on a logical stance, how the fuck does that work? You need to stop and explain that somehow. And they never would. And it was to the point where I said it multiple times throughout my episode reviews. You could have a 50-foot Chucky walk in, like a Godzilla Chucky at some point, and it would not feel out of place, because we've done all this other weird shit, and I would see that and just go, okay, I guess that's a thing he can do now. And all throughout the season, there was this other recurring issue, to where anything that was set up to be significant was dispatched and discarded of very quickly, all throughout the season. I mean, just going off of the plot line that was left hanging from season 1 with this bus full of Chuckies. Within the first 15 minutes of episode 1 of season 2, they completely kill off that whole thing. They literally drive it off a cliff, which makes a lot of the storyline of season 1 seem like that was absolutely for naught. Then throughout this season, when they reset the stage and set these kids into this Catholic school, there is just so many things that are introduced that seems like it's going to be this significant thing, and then it's quite literally killed off. You have this bully that interacts with Lexi that seems like it's going to challenge the character of Lexi and make her decide, does she want to be this bully bitch, or does she want to be bigger than that? And then the kid's killed off. Then you have this scout Chucky that's going around taking these cell phone pictures, and they finally capture him, and they're trying to figure out what the plan is with these pictures, and then that's never mentioned again. You get Buff Chucky that's introduced. It's going to be this huge physical force, and then he's killed off. You have the Colonel version of Chucky that's like, that guys, that is actually the mastermind Chucky. That's the one that's been pulling all the strings. That's the one that's gonna fuck these people, and he's dead within the same episode. Like within an episode of him being introduced as the villain, he's dead. Scissors to the head. There's this big attempt at a plot twist, or a plot reveal, excuse me, regarding the Jennifer Tilly actress still being alive within that original OG Belle doll, that Tiffany doll. It's got this little scar and got the stitching where she was hit with the axe at the end of Seed of Chucky. And that's meant to be this big reveal to fans like, ha! Since 2004, we have not revealed that she's actually still alive. And she's been doing all these things, doing the bidding of Tiffany within this little prison cage. And then within an episode, she's just ran over and splattered across the street. You have this exorcism episode to where they're trying to get the demonic soul out of the Chucky doll. And it's this big, it's a lot of references to The Exorcist, obviously, but it's this big narrative conclusion to the season, essentially, to where that really feels like the season finale in a lot of ways. And the soul gets out of the doll and goes into the nearest person, just like in The Exorcist, and it's Devon Sawa's character. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, so they're trying to get rid of the soul, and actually all they did was let him go into a body that he would not have been able to go into in the first place. Now Devon Sawa is probably going to be this big, oh, he just fucking exploded. Okay. How was he able to do that, by the way? rules, none. And basically any time that they tried to tell you that this is the last Chucky, that this is the one, this is where stakes are high, this is the last doll. If this Chucky dies, that's it. Which in the back of your head, when you're a fan of these franchises, you know they can always come back. So there's always a part of you that never buys into that. But this season especially played that card so many times of that's the last one, that by the time it actually was the last one, or they were really like, we're really, really serious this time, it's the season finale, remember, that's the last doll, stakes are high. I don't think a single person watching this show actually had any investment in that whatsoever, to where this big moment with Lexi, where she actually gets to triumph over Chucky and dispatch of him in this really gory, nasty way and take out all of her rage from the past 2 seasons on him and dispatch of him. Finally, we knew within 5 minutes they're going to show us another Chucky doll. And what did they do? They show us a Chucky doll that's wiping off Belle makeup. Okay. And it's all of that paired with the lack of consistent rules, like they're just not even following their own scripts anymore, that made it so hard to invest myself in season 2, because anything happening could just be explained away as, well, it's Chucky. You know, there are no fucking rules. We just do whatever, which I despise. I despise that reasoning. It's just Chucky. I see that so many times on Twitter. I got that comment so many times. Why are you taking it so seriously, dude? It's just Chucky. Well, Chucky means a fuck of a lot to me. That's why I take it seriously. I've been a diehard fan of this franchise since I was 4 years old. And by no means am I trying to ever say that I know Chucky more than the creators of Chucky, because I would never say anything even close to that. But there is so much about this season that just does not resemble the Chucky that I know and love at all. And when you don't have consistent rules, when you're constantly breaking your own rules, when you're constantly inventing these new things that Chucky can do at the drop of a hat with no logical explanation whatsoever, and then deleting those rules and breaking them within the same episode, when you're introducing these new things and then just dispatching them before they even begin to get interesting constantly throughout the season, it is impossible for me as a viewer to invest myself in what's going on, because it's just going to continuously keep changing on a dime throughout 8 weeks. And that is exactly what it did. And by the end of this season, you took us on this weird, wacky, batshit 8-week-long journey to essentially end us in a place to where there's not really anything different in the status quo than where it was at the end of season 1. You have that bus full of Chuckies that apparently was just fucking pointless. And as far as the characters, they're exactly in the same place that they were at the end of season 1. Jake and Devin had this whole season-long relationship turmoil just to end up on good terms again, so nothing really changed with their relationship. Lexi is still kind of fucked up, and even though she doesn't have a mom anymore, she doesn't feel any differently about her mom. Her mom getting split in half doesn't necessarily change the fact that her mother was fucking horrendous. So she's basically in the same exact space that she was in, with a little bit more motivation to eventually kick the drug habit. You have Tiffany off doing her weird shit, which they obviously did not kill her off, because they're not going to do that, because Jennifer Tilly almost feels like more the star of this show than Chucky at this point, and they didn't even include her in the kill count to the little meta by the fireplace thing they did at the end of the season, which to me just told me right there that she didn't die. And then Chucky's just still out there doing Chucky things with probably 75 million other hidden dolls. You know, he's like Jigsaw at this point. He's got a plan for every scenario. I'm ranting. I try not to rant when I do these, but I get so passionate and the thoughts just roll out so much whenever I'm frustrated that it's hard not to. It's so hard not to. Season 2 for me is just, it was an extremely messy disappointment. As somebody that has been, I would almost say, betrayed by the franchise and then won back so many times back and forth at this point, where I'm exhausted with that relationship. I'm exhausted having that relationship with the Child's Play franchise, to where it's like, you do one for me and then you do one not for me. And then it just, I don't know if they're trying to compromise and please everybody. I don't know if there's just so many wacky ideas that you have to balance it with a batshit crazy installment and then a fairly serious one to get everybody kind of back into the fold and back into your good graces again before you hit them with an even crazier one. I don't know what the motivation is for the way that this franchise continuously just changes up its style of writing, but this season did not appeal to me almost at all with any of the concepts that it was going for, to the point where I pretty much decided I'm not going to cover next season week to week. I'm just going to wait till the season's over and do this type of video for it, because it was emotionally exhausting for me every single week for 8 weeks straight to come on here and just express disappointment and express confusion, and just it was emotionally exhausting. There's that word again. And I don't know where I fit as far as, you know, the pie graph of Chucky fans. I don't know if there's more of us that love the wacky, crazy stuff that they're doing, or more of us that don't like that. I don't know if it's 50-50 or somewhere in between, but it's extremely risky. And I would go as far as to say ill-advised to take that direction and continue the direction that they've been doing with this back and forth writing craziness of Chucky when you're now a TV show. Because as of today, actually right before I clicked record, I'm glad I checked. You look on Twitter and one of the trending hashtags is #RenewChucky. Because where season 1 was announced at the end, or season 2 was announced on the last episode of season 1, because the ratings were so good that they just renewed it before the season was even over with. Season 2 has been over for almost a week now and still no word of a renewing for season 3. And when you do things like this with a TV show, to where you win your audience and then you do things that push them away, or you take a massive risk to push away a large percentage of them, that is not the best route to go on when you're a TV show, because season 3, season 4, whatever, is never guaranteed. So overall, guys, I'm not a fan of season 2. I wouldn't say that I'm looking all that much forward to season 3 until I see a trailer or some kind of a hint that they're not going to just do more of this. I probably won't be. And that sucks. That kills me to say that one of my favorite franchises, I'm not looking forward to what comes next. But that's my honest thoughts on season 2. You know, there was elements of it that I liked. There was moments that I liked, but overall, it was just the same experience every single week, the same collection of issues, the same collection of grievances every single week throughout this entire season, to the point where you get to the end of it, and I can confidently say that this is one of the few things in the Child's Play franchise that I dislike. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed this, please click over here for the playlist of all of my episode reviews of the Chucky series thus far. And I'm also going to put my most recent tier list up here if you want to hear me talk about the movie specifically. Be sure to check out eWin Racing down below and use my promo code to save 30% off. Like and share this video and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.